song? Welcome to the afternoon session for Emerging Trends. We're looking at little clusters of small homes, flexible living, culture of sharing. I'm David Todd. I'm a realtor in Portland and also work with a general contractor here in town. So I come to this both professionally and also as a homeowner with an ADU on my property. In fact, my first tenant was Eli's wife a number of years ago. So to start the day, start the session, I want to remind people that before you leave, to make sure you sign this to get credit, both for GBCI and AIA continuing ed credit. After the session, I think people have been setting them on the lower corner of the stage if you want to sign that up. We're going to do a session where about approximately 20 minutes per panelist, and do question and answers. So I'd like you to, if you could, save questions till the end so each panelist can present the material, and you'll have a chance definitely to speak with each of them. So we're going to go in order of first having Eli present. Eli's a developer builder here in Portland. Then Janelle is a realtor in town. She's the owner of Living Room Realtors and Living Room Property Management. And then we'll finish off. Ross will join us up on stage again as architect developer. Excuse me. I'll let Eli go ahead and take the stage.
Hi everybody, my name is Eli Spivak, and my wife was a tenant at David's house before she was my wife, just to clarify. I am a developer general contractor here in Portland through my company Orange Splot, and I came to Portland back in '94 after college, worked for Habitat for Humanity for a year doing construction, then did affordable housing development for 10 years, and after that went off on my own to experiment with different configurations of housing within the rules of Portland zoning code, and I try and do projects within easy biking distance of my house, so I haven't strayed too far. And I've had a lot of fun with it. And so I want to just go through some of the developments that we've done, share the people who ended up living in them, and maybe add to the mix beyond what you heard this morning in terms of the pocket neighborhoods. I'm working on one project sort of like that now, but I've experimented with some other types of community housing situations. And sort of add that to the menu so you can see what kind of housing types you're trying to create, because what I'm finding is that people in the market are not finding really what they're looking for a lot of the times, and I think you'll hear that from other people in this group. So let me start off, get the technology straight here. This didn't get plugged in, so I press the right arrow, that'll do it, or get primitive. We'll just use the front slide. Okay. Transfer it onto the USB drive, onto the computer, or is it just off the drive? I can make that now. Okay. Oh, put down here. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Again for the. Okay, so my development company is called Orange Splot LLC. We're a co-housing development company, and we're also a general contractor. And our mission is to pioneer new models of affordable, community-oriented housing nestled within existing neighborhoods, so it's infill models. And it's inspired by a favorite book from when I was a child. It's called The Big Orange Splot. Anyone with parents out there, you might know this is a fun story about a guy who lived on a block where all the houses were the same, and he had something happen to his house involving his plot and made his house all different, and eventually his neighbors, after condemning the practice, they went along with the practice and made the house like their dream. So I recommend this book as an inspiration. My affordable housing days definitely informed, and I grew up in Washington, D.C. with pretty denser housing than we have out here. And I did a lot of work in the affordable housing world, including some more like 20 to 60 unit projects. This is one, Olson Woods, and learned about shared common spaces. And here there's on the left side, a common building, something I've continued to include in projects throughout there, and gentle play area with a lot of eyes on the commons. It's actually pretty common. It's another affordable housing development I did in Clark County called Cascadia Commons on both sides of the street with a common house, playground, and a lot of homes looking out into the common area. These are rental, low-income developments, and they're great. And then after doing affordable housing for a while, though, you only burn enough brain cells. You want to kind of do something different for a while. And a friend and I who lived in group homes for years, sometimes people after college, they maybe live in a group house for a couple years, and then they get fed up with it and buy their own house. We both lived in homes for 6-7 years that we owned and rented out rooms, and we liked it, but wanted to have a little more autonomy, more our own front doors. And so we bought this courtyard apartment across the street from Peninsula Park in North Portland, and converted it into, instead of 7 units, which it started, we made it 6 units, and we dedicated 1 unit as a common unit. And we kind of fell into the world of co-housing, where we had shared common courtyard, a shared interior space, which I'll get to. We have sort of a theme among residents, a lot of interest in gardening and bicycling. And every community I've worked on, there seems to be some theme that comes through. And we, in the designing of it, sometimes when groups of people come together to live in a community housing situation, they design it from scratch and they get to bond that way. But we already had a building there, so we worked in landscaping it and put our effort into that. Once it was completed, it was a lot nicer from the street. We have an active courtyard now, garden beds, put in some bike parking in the right of way with some street poetry and the tiles. And the common space got used for all kinds of purposes, and it's changed over time. When we originally moved in, there were 6 households, all single adults, 1 couple, except for 1 couple with a baby. And you'll see we added 3 more units to the mix. But 5 years later, there were 24 people living there, including 8 kids, 4 of whom had been born on the premises. And because of that, we sort of needed more common spaces, and the common spaces which maybe started off with Thanksgiving dinners or birthday parties or political gatherings or something like that, started getting used for mommy groups and for kids' play areas when it's raining outside, or for parents whose kids screaming at the home front, just to get a little bit of break from that. And for people who work from home and want to have a place to meet clients, where their house may be kind of a pit, but the common house is always in nice shape. And so it's evolved over time, but it's a simple space. It's less than 500 square feet. It's got a kitchen in it, dumped it, enough dishes for 40 people, so you always can have company and not have to worry about running out. And a lot of benefits we learned from living there, both before having kids and my wife moved in. We got a daughter there, and the benefits of living in a community once with kids is astronomical. Like handing off a baby monitor to a neighbor and ditching for a movie with no planning ahead of time. It's pretty dreamy. You can't do that now. These are some of the activity in the playground. These kids all were born a year apart on the premises. And lots of impromptu gatherings of residents. Just a really great life in the community. Once a year we throw a big ice cream social. That's from that. And after doing that development, I thought, well, let's try out something else. I was kind of always loved smaller homes, and this is when the housing market was super hot. This is a property 3 blocks off Alberta where I bought do you have a pointer? Do you still have that little laser pointer? Can I borrow it? I did optical physics in college and swore I wouldn't use these things because I know what they can do to you. But I won't wave it across the audience, that's my promise. Okay, well this was an existing house, and behind it a detached garage. That was all that was on the property originally. And then we built a new house, and behind it an accessory dwelling unit, and we converted the garage to an accessory dwelling unit. I love converting parking space to people space. And this is what it ended up looking like. That's before, that's the existing house. That's after, with the new house. We got some stained glass up top, a little walkway in between. You go through there, and then you get to the back courtyard where there's that little house in the back corner. That's 20 by 20 house. That's like a footprint, would fit easily into the corner of this room here. And it's got a little spiral stair in it. There's that picture. And spiral stairs is our architect I worked with was Community Texture, Mark Lakeman and Company. And they pointed out spiral stairs are great for collecting dust bunnies underneath, so we used all this area underneath for storage. And the community came together as part of the village building convergence to create a shared space that, once completed, is a community project. A lot of COB going into it. You can see it there. Gets used as a guest house. And all this is on a 75 by 100 foot property. 4 homes, guest house. There's also a little bike storage room. And when especially building the tiny houses, I expected to be single people to buy them. But one of the houses that was, the one you saw pictured with the spiral stair, that was purchased by a couple with their 2 cats. It's under 500 square feet. They had a baby. And only after over a year, they finally moved out to have a bigger space. And the reason they stay there so long is because of the benefits of living in the community. I mean, one of the nice things about living in small homes is it's a lot more imaginable if you have a community around you and spaces to go outside the house. Then another couple moved in, and now they're having a baby. So they're kind of fertile spaces too. And other developments, other people in this development include a set of boomers and other young families. So you get quite an intergenerational mix within a single 4-unit community. While that was under construction, I was consulting on the finance side on this is a Corvallis project, which is a co-housing development on 6 acres, where they put all the homes onto between a third and a half of the site. And that's the common building there getting constructed. And this is more of a classic co-housing model, for sale, 32 units, all homes sold within 2 months of completion of the project. And actually got an invitation last night to their 5th year anniversary of completing that project. This one has 8 units of affordable housing with some funding from the county, the city, and the state of Oregon. 1 house with developmentally disabled residents, and that's a terrific mix because they actually have 3 people living in 1 house. It's owned by a nonprofit, and it's the ultimate situation where they can be integrated into community meals and the broader community in a way that, for many situations, people with developmental disabilities end up being pretty isolated. This is the common house down there. And this is just after moving. The kids have started to take over a little bit, and much more so now. And they also have large community gatherings pretty often. A lot of gardening interest. And for anyone who does a development, if you want to make it supportive of bicyclists, you have to recognize that people who like the bicycle have a lot of bicycles. They don't just have one. So I'm a big fan of bike parking, but you got to provide enough. And back to the Peninsula Park Commons development, it came with 7 garages, and thanks to Portland's wisdom, they got rid of parking minimums near transit. This is right on a transit line. So for 3 years, we had not a single car in any of those garages. And we had a lot of bikes in one of them. So we tore them down and built some new homes. These are 3-story buildings, and the original unit mix, they're all 1 and 2 bedroom units, like 600, 700 square feet, fairly small. So we built 2 3-bedroom units, still fairly small, 1,200 square feet, and a 600 square foot unit below, and incorporated some bike artwork into the project. We took down a tree. I got some, in the slam at the end of the summit, I've got some more pictures of some of the artistic details, but we use all live edge trim in the project. Had some fun stained glass in the gables, and included some fun bike art in the trellises. Taking the theme that if you're going to build it small, it darn well better be charming. And I think that that's important. The smaller it is, the cuter it's got to look. Putting some bike in the railing system. And courtyards are wonderful. This is a swirly courtyard we built, which is more private than the more public courtyard you saw out front. So as completed, you see you've got the front courtyard here. This is the common unit that connects through to the back courtyard back there. 9 units total, kind of the size that you heard about earlier today from Russ. This is another development not far away, Daybreak Co-Housing, 30 some odd units with a shared common building. This is during construction, and that's as completed. So this is a little bit more modern design. They've got a substantial common house. This project was being built while the housing economy was going into the dirt. So they've had a lot of trouble. So it's now a mixed ownership and rental development, but it's got some beautiful spaces in it. And there's another version, just to throw out a few more models. This is up the street in Northeast Portland, where people who own this 2-acre in-holding, accessible by an easement, from a busy street, purchased this 37-unit apartment complex out front, converted them all to well-renovated green a condo conversion, and made this whole back area into a common element with a common house on it. And that's another way to create community, kind of faster than new construction, frankly, is to convert something that's already there. These are images of the common house and some community gatherings there. Back to I was still going to get smaller, so I found a 50 by 100 foot lot with a tiny little grandma house in the back corner of it in Northeast Portland. There's the house. It's about a 670 square foot footprint with a small half upstairs and 60 feet of garden out front. We never actually built this thing. That was a schematic, but here's what we did with it. You can barely see the house from the street right now. And we built to the side of it 2 detached bedrooms. So for all the zoning people out there, this is not an accessory dwelling. In Portland, you could build 5 of these things if you wanted to. Each one has its own bathroom. I thought when I brought it into the city, I could almost buy this over-the-counter permit. Actually, I did get it. I got the permit the same day I brought it in. And the person there said, yeah, they do this sometimes in the West Hills, the expensive lots. People have like the master bedrooms not attached to the house. Well, you could do this in any old lot. And they came out really nice. They're 12 by 14 feet. They have a little sleeping loft in them. They went up really fast. You barely need a building permit for these things. They're so small that you can build up to 200 square feet in Portland without a building permit, 10 feet high. But since they're habitable space, we had to get permits. This is looking back at the garden. Bike storage behind the house. This is inside the house. There's a little sleeping loft. Through that door, there's a shower on one side, a toilet on the other. We had some leftover live edge trim from a past project, so we put that there. The only rule is you can't have a kitchen in there. That's when it becomes an accessory dwelling. Although I hear in Seattle that you could put a kitchen in there. And as completed, in terms of who's living there, because that's part of this, is folks who love living in group housing, but maybe don't want to share walls. You know, they're kind of done with that part of life. And the woman who rented this house initially, she rented it with her, she lived there. A friend of hers lived in the house behind it, which is the same dimensions, just turned at a 90-degree angle. And then a couple lived upstairs here. Well, this couple moved to California. She fell in love with this guy. They moved upstairs. They got married in this courtyard. They had 1 baby, then 2 babies, and they're still living there. And they've got friends living in the detached homes. And what I found is that with the kids of the boomers, they're trying to figure out some affordable way of living in their community, and they're not necessarily ready to buy anything yet. And instead of living in group housing for a couple years after school, they're living in group housing for 10, 20 years after school. They're starting families that way. And they want to live in community. Their neighbors might not be near, their family may not be in town. And this is the sort of thing that works for them. And it can work for someone else too. Those homes, those detached structures could be offices or something like that. And then getting really small, you're missing the other presentation on this because you're right here. We're building a little tiny house in our driveway right now on wheels, and my dream is to do a little pod of 3 of these things. This is the first one. And these are on wheels. This is not legal to live in the thing. You can build it all you want. But I think that a pod would be a wonderful, just have a pod of 3 of those things in a large backyard behind a single family house, and it would be a wonderful example of affordable living for, and if you get in trouble, you just move the things. This is a development I did called Woolsey Corner, and this is a partnership with a local nonprofit to do 8 homes with a land trust. So these are all affordable first-time home buyers. In fact, they're restricted to first-time home buyers. They're 2 and 3 bedroom units, range in size from 600 square feet to 1,300 square feet, and there's a common unit nestled in amidst them. There's a shared courtyard, and the home sold for $90,000 for the 2 bedrooms and $130 to $140 for the 3 bedroom units, thanks to some subsidy from the city of Portland, which has a string attached, which is that when you resell it, whenever that is, you have to pass on the good deal to the next buyer. Other than that, it's just like home ownership. This is it going up. We wrapped it around a silver maple tree. And I should say this lot was originally platted for 4 narrow, it's like 25-foot wide mini narrow homes. And I actually did a density transfer to be able to build 8 units here. Looking out across the garden, which is right next door. This is right on a bus line, right across from a community center. And this is as completed. Woolsey Corner. A sampling of the artwork sprinkled through the project. This time we have a musical theme going. And fun little doorbells. And got some our curvy trellises. And once again, the construction style is pretty standard construction. Really good green stuff, of course, but then we put in a few artistic elements and people adore it. An ice cream social we held there. And I should say the buyer mix on that development is probably the most varied I've had so far. There's a single woman with a kid, a couple with a baby, a couple who might have a family sometime, and then also boomers who are either empty nesters or just single living on their own in sort of 50, 60 year age. This is the development that's under construction right now. It's up in the northeast Portland. It's got 16 homes on 2 acres, and this is the closest to a cottage neighborhood, as Ross would term it. And it's got I know people probably saw Jordan speak this morning about the benefits of small homes. Up there with being a small home is being attached housing, in terms of environmental benefit. And on this development, because we wanted to keep as much open space as we could, we ended up building 13 of the homes in 2 or 3 unit buildings. And we had a few single-family detached homes. This is the first project we were required to pre-sell any units. And this is me and my friend Zach. We both have families and we're developing this together. So here's some pictures of the job site. My daughter operating the backhoe, helping out a little bit. We designed the development around this big oak tree, and this is the site plan of it. A little bit better picture. This is what I climbed a tree across the street from the job site to take that picture. But we've got a common house here that everyone will share. There'll be a community garden on site, existing trees here, existing trees there. We're digging a well on site for irrigation, so we don't have to pay city for its water for that purpose. We'll have outside the common house facing the courtyard, there's a covered area, which will have an outdoor kitchen, so you can clean the potatoes without taking them into your house, or barbecue fish without smelling up the house. The common house has upstairs 2 guest bedrooms and downstairs a shared gathering spot with a wood stove and a small kitchen for community gatherings. And it's really kind of appealing to folks who are looking into the last sort of what buyers we're seeing. This is the first time we had to pre-sell a project, and the people who are most able to purchase in that situation are empty nesters because they tend to have equity and patience. Families, it's a lot harder to find that. People who have that going for them. And yet, the people who are empty nesters want to be around kids. And the truth is, if all these homes were single level flats, maybe a little smaller than what we have, then the only kids in the whole project would have been my daughter and our partner's 3 kids in development. Because the empty nesters would have just taken them all. And they would have been disappointed because there would be almost no kids there, and the people with kids would be disappointed too. So we sort of learned from experience. But what I found is that in trying to, so we've landed actually, I should say, on a mix that's 50-50 about boomers and young families, which we're excited that that's what it's going to be. I'll say that. But I think that going forward, and when I hear people asking what's your next project going to be, or who, they're mostly people who are close to retirement and are getting to a point where they really want to live their values, and they've got money. And the people who also want to live in situations like this oftentimes don't have that combination of things. So it's really hard, even with some intention, to create communities where it's a mixed generation. So that's one of the things, as I've been trying to experiment with models, trying to come up with ways to create affordability within developments, so that, and one of the best ways to do that is just building small homes. So I'm all into little zoning tricks and things like that to figure out how to nestle small homes in within the larger development. So I think I probably have gone way over. I don't know what I've done. Oh, what do you know? Then I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
So I don't have slides today, but if I did, our slides would be probably the people that we help put in homes. I don't have any projects to show, but each one of our clients means a lot, and I'd love to be able to show each of their faces. My name is Janelle Isaacson. I own a residential real estate company and a property management company here in Portland called Living Room Realtors. I started Living Room Realtors in 2008 in the depth of the housing market recession. Most people thought I was crazy, but it worked out for us. And now we have the 7th largest market share in the city of Portland. And a lot of people wonder how we did it. First of all, I've got the best agents in the city, but also we really, I think, were listening to what people wanted. And one of those things that we're paying attention to was that the largest segment of home buyers are actually single women. But everything that I saw marketed and directed towards home buyers in the city of Portland was this, nuclear family with 2 kids outside living in this giant house. And myself and my colleagues were kind of looking around and like, do you have any clients who look like that? No. Yeah, neither do I. So why don't we start a company that actually talks to the real people that are buying houses here in Portland? So that's what we did, and I'm here to talk a little bit about like the conversations that we're having about what people are really looking for and what we're not able to find. And hopefully that's going to stir up some development from you all, and you're going to create it for us, and we're going to be able to sell it, and we'll all be happy. So first job I think that we have is that we match people with the right community. People don't so much come to our office and talk to us about the kind of house that they want to live in. They talk about the kind of the lifestyle that they want to live. And a lot of times I feel like a yentl, like I'm a matchmaker. And to make sure you're in the right place, you're going to meet the right people, you're going to be happy and fulfilled. And also to really understand the flexibility and the modern needs of our clients. Living large, building small is kind of near and dear to my heart because when I was a home buyer, my first home that I bought, I was in a traveling punk band, and it was really important for me that my expenses were as little as possible, and I always needed that backdoor plan that I had like a garage or something I could cram my stuff in or live in and rent out the main house. So 10 years later, my band's not getting back together, but it's still instilled in me the need for flexible housing, especially for those of us that are self-employed and don't really know all the time what we're going to be doing 2 years from now in the younger generation. The average sales price in our company, we do interurban neighborhoods, is about $330,000. To kind of give you a picture of what we do. Our buyers, I kind of break them into 3 different categories. We've got fashion buyers who will buy anything if it's trendy in the right neighborhood and it just looks cool. They want it to be green because that's cool, but they'd rather pay more for style, and they're frustrated at the regurgitated bungalow because that's mainly what we have to show them if we're going to show them something new. And then we've got our value buyers, and they really want something that's green. They want it to be energy efficient. They'll put more emphasis on community. And then we have the investment buyers that just want a good return. They're buying a piece of real estate because what they're hoping it'll do is it'll leverage some equity for them, and they'll be able to make another financial decision with that money. So 2008 hit, and a lot of us as realtors were like, wow. Like, the market just, you could hear it. It was like, okay, but people still had to move. It was just that the conversation really changed, and it was refreshing, because finally people weren't looking at, like, their houses as endless, piggy banks. But what we started to have were a lot of conversations about the reality of a home being a liability and not an asset. That this was something that was going to cost some money, and how do you make your liability the smallest that you can? And all of a sudden, there was like a light went off, and first thing we saw was the Daylight Ranch. I mean, a lot of us grew up in those in the 70s. All of a sudden, it became the hottest house on the market because it had a basement that you could rent out. You could stash your parents down there. You could divide it into 2, and so all of a sudden, these split levels that we could not move were the it house, which was exciting for a lot of the neighborhoods that hadn't sold a split level in a long time, and people that own them that sell their equity rise. So that had happened as a trend. And a lot of, we started having a lot of discussions about garages and ADUs and could they build an ADU there. And I probably have, 75% of my clients, we've had that conversation. They'd like to build an ADU, but there's no money to build it. So I'm hoping that you're all paying attention in how to finance them, because I got a lot of clients who like to finance one and build one. It costs about $100,000 to build a decent sized ADU on your property. And that if you were going to pay that in a 4.5% loan, which is going rates right now, is about $506 a month. Well, we also do property management at the company, and I know to rent an ADU in the city, we could easily get $1,200 a month. So you've got this way to really increase your cash flow coming into the house. We just need more loan products or folks to do it. But that's definitely something that, like, our buyers, they'd love to be able to do if they could get the financing for it. Let's see. I think the other thing that we saw a lot of people buying plexes, people getting together, buying a duplex together, sharing resources, sharing lawnmowers, doing all that. That was fun to see, like people building some intentional communities, the conversation about things, that Eli's been doing, like being hot topics and people looking at that. Before the recession, it was harder for me to get people excited about those kind of ideas, but once we were really hitting their pocketbooks, the light bulbs started going off. Another thing that I think is a trend that we saw that for me caught me by surprise was that we had developers that were doing these really sexy developments. Perfect example is the Tanzmook development that was done by Ryco Teen and designed by Ben Hufford here in town. And they did 10 row houses right in the Irvington neighborhood, and they were clean, they were modern, they were really beautiful. And so when we developed our marketing strategy for that, when we saw those and knowing the people that developed them, we thought, we're gonna have this probably this late 30s, early 40s buyer. They want to walk to work. They're an urban buyer. They're young. They're hip. They're single. And what we wound up finding happen is every single unit of those 10 sold to people of retirement age. So it's really the boomers, and especially with the way that the economic shift out is that, like Eli was saying, these are the only people that have the patience and the equity to move on these sorts of projects. So as much as we like to talk about diversification and seeing all these things happen, unfortunately, when financially it's not feasible for anybody but these boomers to move on these projects, it's probably who is going to wind up living in them. And I also think that they're in a space in their lives too where they're making value purchases. They've got the money to do that, to really put their money where their values lie. And that's been interesting to see how that dynamic shifted the market and what we see, and how we see people marketing now in real estate. We don't try to go for that hip, trendy 35-year-old. We're looking for, the single mom of, 2 grown kids who wants a place for her kids to crash occasionally and be able to walk to the grocery store and meet her friends for book club. That's really who we should be marketing to. Then I think the third trend that we really saw emerge is in our higher price, in the higher price market. So our $500,000 to $1 million buyer, which we have quite a bit of because we work in the inner urban neighborhood. So when we're talking about Irvington, Alameda, Laurelhurst, anything that's really within a close proximity to the urban core, you're looking at about a $500,000 buy-in in a lot of these neighborhoods. And what started happening there and shifting there for us was that we really saw that luxury became redefined. It wasn't so much the big space, and I think a perfect example of this is seeing what happened with Renaissance Homes. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but they were the #1 private landowner on the West Coast. And when the recession hit, they basically had to totally change their entire business model and stop building large homes out in the outer rings of the city, and they started buying infill lots. And what they do is build these modern craftsmen we'll call them, and they sell, they pre-sell. And I know in our company and for our buyers, they would love to find something that just wasn't a regurgitated larger craftsman, but that's all that there is. And because they don't have the patience to wait it out, like you were saying, and the equity, they wind up buying these houses. I have clients just recently who bought a 3,500 square foot craftsman in the Alameda School District. It was really important to them, but they would have gladly paid the same amount of money for a lot less square footage and higher end finishes. So there's a huge need for that that's just not being met. People want really nice quality materials. They would have liked if they would have had a lot less MDF in their house, real wood, no VOC paints. These are the kind of things. We've got sophisticated buyers who would like to find these things and just aren't finding them. The other kind of thing that we were looking at, we were talking about today as a group, was that these smaller homes there's a real need for homes between that $200,000 to $250,000 price range. Very difficult to find in the city. But when developers have done them, even when they haven't been spectacular and there's been a lot of downsides to them, like not a lot of yard or backing up against a parking lot, not the most desirable locations, they sell really quickly. There's a row of 10 of them that are pretty nice right behind Old Town Pizza on Garfield, right off of MLK, and all of those, they went up and were sold just about as quick as they could put them up. So there's a demand, and there's one thing I'd just like to get across, I think, is that we're sitting and talking to people. The first thoughts they have about house, they usually come and they talk to a broker. They're like, well, we'll talk to a broker and what's out there. And I think the most frustrating part of our job is just not having the houses we'd like to be able to show them, and not having a way to be able to make it enough loan programs to make it affordable to get them in. And it makes a lot of sense right now for people to buy, because the rent prices are far above what you pay for a purchase price. So it's there, the demand's there, and I'm just really hopeful about this conversation and where this might go, that we might create some housing that everyone's going to be proud to live in, and we're going to be proud to sell, and they're going to make Portland an amazing city to be in. So thank you for the opportunity.
Lastly, we're going to have Ross come back up and present a slightly different take than from this morning and from our first two panelists.
Was to put together a number of slides. It's not as fancy and tricky and clear lineage of this morning's presentation, but I thought that it would be good to have just a conversation of the people that are involved in some of the houses, and I'm thinking more houses, some community, some houses. Also to take a look at some of the elements within the houses. Take a little time and just tease them apart and say what's going on here. This is a part of a larger neighborhood that we developed, and we worked with a couple who are empty nester. They both work at home. We ended up creating two work areas and one bedroom. So it's essentially a 3-bedroom house, sort of your standard mix, except that they both work at home. And instead of having one large living room, let's see if we have this, the next one. Instead of having one large living room, we have an active, can you see this well enough? We have an active building here. This is the kitchen, eating area, eating alcove. This opens straight out to a terrace with an outdoor chimney barbecue area. And down through here in a quiet room here is the living room. it opens right out to the terrace as well. So there can be lots of activity going on here, and this is more like a den. This has a higher ceiling, this has a lower ceiling. And then on the main level, we've got their bedroom and the bathroom, which serves the rest of the house. And up above are 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, but those 2 bedrooms are their offices. This is the active room, and it's a garden room. Right outside, they didn't plant just a blade of grass. It's all quite a serious garden, and not only does the kitchen look out to it, but the terrace opens out to it, and it's pretty significant. It's fun to be in. This is the quiet room, different feeling. Lower ceiling, you can see the terrace that it opens out to. And then looking back from the quiet room to the right, we have tried to weave in, when I talked about having places where you widen the walls and the structure becomes usable. You have a wide wall. This shows the bookshelf. Slightly farther down, you'll see some cabinets, and then there's an opening into the quiet room. So you've got this interplay of spaces. Fairly small house, but there's a lot of surprise as you go along the way. At the end of the hall is this little alcove that I showed a picture of earlier, and then a bedroom beyond. There are shelves or drawers underneath here with down comforters and blankets and pillows and places for grandkids' toys. This is looking back. So here you can see the main active room at the far end. So even though it's fairly straightforward, forms that come together, they're interlocked in these rooms. Karen DeLucas, who works with me, designed this, and she and her husband, who's a builder, he's got his shop below, and he has, as they got together, he had this little tiny house on the corner, which you see in the back, and pretty funky. It's kind of a tear down. And they ended up designing this and building this, and the 2 of them live upstairs. He has his shop downstairs, and I think it's large enough that she can put her car in. I wanted to point out something that's really quite fun. So they've got one open space up above. It's a bedroom, dining room, living room, kitchen. And this is the divider between the bedroom, which transforms into an office, and the dining room. And so now the dining room transforms into a living room with a place for a movie, and you fold up the divider, and his office is closed off. So there it is right there. Piece of furniture which transforms the rooms. What a wonderful, versatile kind of thing. This is my friend Billy, and so he is a screenwriter from LA, and he and his wife met when they were in their late 50s and fell in love. Well, he's a creative type. He's watching movies till 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. He's always cooking, and he likes to sleep in the morning. His wife is the opposite. She wakes up at 5 in the morning, meditates for an hour, does yoga. She loves to cook. He's kind of messy. She's neat. They love each other. They can't live together. Do you know anybody like that? And I think what we need to do is to just ease up on our definition of what a healthy couple is. You know, are they, 2 loving people who see the world in the same way and have the same joys and lifestyles, and they're either both neat or they're both tolerant. Billy, so what we did, let's see what the next slide is here. What we did was to create a front house and a back house. And Billy lives in the back house. It's 417 square feet. You walk in and it's just filled with all these sort of videos and books, and he's got a dog back there, and he's got late night snacks that are still around in the morning. It's really fun. The front house is a little different. And so they share the main portion of the front house, and she has the back. And then they get together. They love each other. They enjoy each other's company. But they also have a quiet place that they can, go back to. So she's a gardener. He just wants something that you plant and it gets green. Just leave it. That's fine. So this is Paula. And here you can see the main room of the main house, which is what they live in a lot. And then of course, they share bedrooms on special occasions. This room is 11 feet wide on the interior. Doesn't mean that it has to be cramped and tight. And then I think that built-ins make a small house live large and give it a sense of quality and character. Even though the building may be pretty boxy, I think if you bring in something like this, spend a little extra money, it's not a great deal. And part of it is the attention. I love the way Eli had those artistic touches. So we worked and did a sketch of the cabinet maker. And so he put that's very simple stuff to do. He just took a router and cut that open. And yet it's that little touch that makes the big difference. Costs almost nothing. This is Billy's back studio. And somewhere or another along the line he picked up the barber chair, and you can see that. That's one of his favorite chairs. There's a little loft in this. I think he cleaned up for the day that I was in there. Here's something interesting. So the yards are pretty close together. We're trying to figure out how do we have privacy and weave them together at the same time. This outbuilding is a covered fence on the property line. And on one side is a little sitting area which opens up to this area. And on the other side is a sitting area for Paula and Billy that open up to the other side. And they've got a little stained glass between them. And so they have togetherness and privacy. This is next door. So Paula and Billy's house, the front house is here. Next door, we were in the process of getting ready to build this, and this couple came forward. And Rick has MS. He used to be a football player, and his life changed. And he wanted to live in a simple house, but he didn't want to be just housebound. He wanted to engage with others. So not only did he live in a little pocket neighborhood, but he said, I don't want to just see everything from the same vantage. I would like to go up, and we showed him the three houses. One was 1 story, one was 2 story, the other was 3 stories. He said, I'd like a 3-story one. And so we ended up figuring out a way to reconfigure the plan and have an elevator going up. And so he's housebound on 3 levels, and he can go up to the top terrace and sit out in his rolling wheelchair and look out over the surrounding neighborhood, see his neighbors down in the courtyard from up above as well as in the bedroom. There's no stairway going up. There's this alternating stair ladder going up from the roof terrace over the garage, and there's an elevator going all the way up. And up top is a 3-season room. It's not insulated. The elevator opens up, and you go into this room. The windows open wide, and you look down over Langley and over to Camino Island, and he can feel like he's just part of the world. What a difference. Okay, I'd like to point out, there's a couple of slides here. There's a room that I'd like a suggestion for a name. I call it the catch-all room, and I just want to introduce it here. I don't know if you can see this very well. So we designed this house, and it's got the main room with the living room, the kitchen, and alcove off to a porch. This is the entry. But off the kitchen is this room, which is the catch-all room. It's got a place to drop off mail. It's got a pantry for the kitchen. It's got a washer and dryer. This door opens up and it goes out to an enclosed vegetable garden. This is a place for projects, for bringing in and processing some of the food, for Christmas things that are happening, which you don't have to clean up when you're making supper. The catch-all room. Next to the kitchen, fairly close to the entry, next to the garden. I think that it's one of the most work-hard rooms in the entire house. And I think a small house can live larger with this kind of room. And so I've begun to if you've got a better name than catch-all room, I'm open. Any suggestions? A butler pantry? I don't have any butlers anymore.
Well, in our home we call it the hole.
The hole?
The hole with the D at the end.
There you go. Oh, the hold.
The hole.
Okay, that's
For
good.
everything ends up.
Fibber McGee's Closet, yes. I love it. That's good. A what? All-purpose room, that's good. It needs a, maybe a little, well, some people have their computer home office. But that's kind of before everybody moved to laptops, which then moved to the living room sofa. Utility rooms, except that utility feels so, I mean, I know it's functional, but it's like it's got lots of light and it's projects and it's creative. It's not just do the wash. A home ec room. Home ec at home.
I call it a workroom.
A workroom.
I do a similar thing where you separate out the kitchen because kitchens are entertaining spaces.
There you go.
And this is a workroom. This is a functioning work.
Fun.
There.
That's great. So here's another one. This is, I can't say it's a small house, but for the use and the size of family, it's pretty small. But I want to point out here, this is the main house, and we come in through here. Here's an outside separate building, which is their offices, and they've got clients that come, and so they go to work. So they commute to work through a covered walkway out to the outdoor room. This could be a wonderful little guest room as well, but for them it's a work hard office kind of room. But here, as you come in the door, there is another space which is the laundry, the workroom. It opens out to the garden as well, and it's a little far from the kitchen, but not bad. Just another version of it. This is what we call the gable house, and this was for a family. It's kind of the equivalent. This was the 1990s equivalent of Ozzie and Harriet. There was mom, dad, and 2 teenagers, and they had a limited budget, and we tried to figure out what to do. So, a couple of things here I think is helpful. Is that the house form is fairly simple, with some poetry to it. And so we added the gable. We call this the gable house. And to meet their budget, I think it was at that time it was $147,000 or something like that. It was pretty reasonable. But they had some extra money, and I said, instead of having a simple house and cutting on everything, in other words, vinyl windows, sheetrock, 8-foot high ceilings, carpeting on the floor. You may have those, but how about spending extra money on an outdoor fireplace, which then on the other side is the alcove, brick alcove for a wood stove. And so they spent about $6,000 on this, something that was completely opposite of the whole upper floor is just real basic, it's tracked home basic. The other thing that we did, I'll show you in a minute. Here's this was just earlier this summer. Going back there, it's just absolutely wonderful outdoor area, and it extends the season quite a bit. We had a wonderful time detailing this. So I noticed, I lived with the family for a few days to try to get a feel for how they lived. And the living room was never used. The dining room was never used. They ended up basically around the kitchen, and then they had a little breakfast table, and the family was actually very together. They had projects going on, they had conversations going on, they all lived there. And so, okay, how about if we design the house around the family room? There's no formal anything. On one end of the room, shoot, I don't have another picture of this. Anyway, on this end of the room is the bench, and here you'll see the fireplace. Opposite of that is the outdoor one. We've got a 10-foot high ceiling. We spent a little extra on the beam work and the grids. The opposite side is an eating alcove and a straightforward kitchen. So one room that feels big combined is quite a bit smaller than adding up living room, kitchen, dining room. We have one room that's 26 feet wide by I think 14 or 16. Feels big, but it's actually smaller. This is the floor plan for it on the main level. Here you see one large room. And then we have, somebody asked me earlier about design houses for larger families, and I said, yes. And the key here is, think about a small house is not a square footage. It's a house that's fully used, that's fully occupied. And so with this family, we had the parents on the lower floor with a bedroom that is, bathroom that's shared. They've got a budget. And up above, the kids have bedrooms on either side. So everybody has their own realm, and they come together around the shared area. So I think, like Alexander says, a house for a small family has a commons, a parent's realm, and a children's realm. And think about a house designed for divorce. You've got the living room, and you've got a hallway with parents and teenagers back to back with one another. And you know, they're on a different sleep schedule, and their sound radios and guitars and all that stuff. You know, it's great for teenagers to have that, but to force parents and kids together when they really need to be starting to move apart. So you can design a family house, I think, for a healthier family in this way. It doesn't have to be very big. Just finished a little cottage for this woman, and she's in her upper 70s. And she's lived here in this house for many, many, many years, and we found a way to build a little backyard cottage. Simple room, bedroom, little office. Very sweet. My friend Kim Holting, I wanted to bring him in here. Kim and I have collaborated since I moved to Whidbey Island 30 years ago. A rambunctious curmudgeon of sorts, an artisan craftsman, wood scrounger. He has Northwest Woods, and he basically salvages wood from around the Northwest coast, from Alaska to the Washington coast, and repurposes it. And one of the things that we played around with and that he's followed through on is that he'll take this scrap wood and he'll build these cottages, and he'll build them. He built this in the barn. Here he's working on a door, and I don't think he even knew I was snapping this picture. I hope he's okay with that. Here's a little cottage that he built. He's got this sort of magical, whimsical sense, and he put it under this big tree next to a huge field. And what he's done is to try to figure out some kind of modular system that he could do a custom home, depending upon what wood is available, around with very carefully configured dimensions. By the way, how am I doing with time? I'm about to wrap up, but yeah, that's okay. And he'll take this just amazing wood. He can, on all the buildings that he builds, he can tell you where the log was sourced, you know, for it, and his stories on these buildings are absolutely wonderful. So that is
there's still a mic floating around I can use.
So I had a question. In Portland, neighborhoods have a special, I think they have a special authority in the city, in the state. I'm not exactly sure, but there's a lot of angst among neighborhood activists, and I'm a neighborhood activist in Hillsdale, that people don't participate in those particular venues. There's neighborhood meetings, lots of land use things get decided. And I'm just curious, when you start, one of the things I'm very intrigued by this housing type, when I start thinking of 10-unit housing making a community, what does that do to the broader community, and how does it affect the fabric of a community that's already established? Has anybody thought about that?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. I purposely do developments that are relatively small, as opposed to sort of classical housing projects, which are more like 30 to 40 units. Because I think when you have larger developments, this has actually been kind of documented a little bit, there's so much of your mental bandwidth living there is with your neighbors within the community. People are less likely to be actively involved outside the community. And I found in the developments that I've worked on and have lived in that by keeping the numbers down relatively low, and I know Ross does with his projects too, people get to know their immediate neighbors, but they also have interest in active participation in the neighborhood associations. I've never lived with such neighbors so active, involved in associations since I lived in rural communities. So I think that has a lot to do with size. And I do know that some like Wood Village has adopted a cottage cluster into their zoning code. And I don't know how common this is, but sometimes there's requirements that you can't have them closer than like 1,000 feet from one another. So they don't end up dominating any neighborhood, but they might be tucked in. So I don't know if that gets your answer. Not really?
I think it has to do with, is this on? This one? Okay. I think your question may have had to do with the impact on the surrounding neighbors. So I think it's really important that some of the things that we're talking about is that with the cottage courtyard developments that I've been involved in, is that these are limited in scale and bulk. You can have a 4,000 square foot house moving onto a lot that has a huge impact, a lot of impact on the surrounding neighbors. You can also have cottage scale, smaller buildings that have minimal or less impact. There's certainly cars, but I think the cars need to be dealt with careful design. The other piece is that with something that's slightly larger, like a cottage courtyard development, they are approved by conditional use, not prescriptive. It's not like, oh, okay, we just fill out the form, we make sure that all the checklists, and boom, we get to move it through inspections and permits. This is you engage with the neighborhood, get their feedback, engage with the city, and there's a conditional use permit, and it's quite carefully reviewed. The incentives are there, and the challenge that I have to cities is that sometimes the processing barriers are so high that it's not worth the incentive to builders to move forward even at double density of small houses. There's just a lot more thinking, there's a lot more care that's involved in a good project rather than a cut-em-up subdivision.
I guess just piggybacking on that question, maybe with a little more detail on parking. You had, Ross, I think, had spoken earlier about the parking ratios you provide. In terms of dealing with neighborhood concerns, I assume that's pretty high on the list. Is there any other than providing adequate parking on the site, is there any other provisions to ensure you don't have a lot of spillover parking?
Well, again, I think that parking is dealt with on a neighborhood scale. And so we take a look at how the parking is balanced between on-site and on-street, and which are the new built streets, and we try to have virtually no overflow onto the wider neighborhood streets. So we try to look at the reality of it along with the zoning code for it. But we have, when we did the Third Street cottages, I believe the requirement was 1.25 spaces per unit, and police chief was very concerned about this, as well as the neighbors. And this was the very first project that had been done. It was almost a demonstration project. And it was approved, and the police chief said, I will go every day and check to see the parking. In 10 years, 15 years, never has the parking been full. It's at 1.25, never. And so small households don't have generally 2 cars. And then because we've got some undesignated spaces, they're not just tied up. So it seems to work. But it has to be done very thoughtfully and carefully, not just, we're going to push this thing through. It's got to be either transit-oriented and decrease the requirements because of that. Somehow deal with it on the larger neighborhood scale.
Question back here?
Mr. Spivak, I think you mentioned the term density transfer. That's one I'm not familiar with. Is that a general term or something specific? Or?
It's a specific term in Portland, at least. It is in low-density multifamily zones in Portland. It is possible to transfer density to adjoining lots. And what I was able to do, there was a development the Housing Authority of Portland had done, which covered a couple 100 acres or something, pretty large development, a Hope 6 project. And they had some adjoining apartments that were never going to use the density allowed for them. So I got them to transfer that over to me along with the property. And they just had to sign a restriction saying that they couldn't use that density, which they were never going to use anyway, and I could use it. So it's not something typically allowed in single-family zones, but it is very helpful as a way of getting a few more units on one property instead of on the property next to it.
I have a question. How much did you pay for that? We have we have a situation in our office like that, and it's like defining what the value of that is.
Yeah, I negotiated with the purchase, so I got bundled in because they owned the property next to me and the property they were selling to me. I'll bet that it's pretty cheap to buy density nowadays. There's a lot of stuff that's not getting used.
Eli, you had mentioned on the Woolsey corner that you passed a good deal of the cost of the house onto the next buyers. How is that established?
The city put in about $72,000 per unit of permanent subsidy from urban renewal funds, and people in the affordable housing world would be sick of this, but it's one of the ways that the city provides affordability to housing. So the real cost of building that housing were about $70,000 more than what we sold the units for. When people purchase the home, they own the units, they can pass it on to their kids, they can change the interior, they vote in the association, they got all the powers of home ownership, they get the mortgage interest deduction. But when they sell it, there's a deed restriction saying that they have to sell it to an income qualified purchaser at a capped sales price, which is calculated based on what they purchased it for plus 25% of what it's appreciated. So that's a way of saying that the formula is sort of set up so if it's affordable initially to someone making 50% of average income, maybe they're a social service worker, a teacher, or a cop, that the odds are 100 years later it's still going to be affordable to someone who is a service worker, case essential jobs, but also odds are over that 100-year period that housing prices might otherwise kick anyone with those kind of professions out of the neighborhood. So it's a great housing model. It works both in the single-family zones and it can work in a multifamily setting, which is what we did there. And there's land trusts. Portland has one called Proud Ground. There's land trusts in Washington State. There are a lot more in Washington State than in Oregon and across the country.
Hi. Is there anything that you'd like to see local governments doing to either provide incentives or remove barriers to the development of smaller housing?
I have a lot of thoughts on this, which I'll share some of them after the SLAM session. But developers, I feel like I'm a developer kind of with ADD. You can see these projects are all different. Any sane developer would find something that works and keep doing it. And I think that developers work based on the rules that are in place. And tweaking those rules a little bit can cause a big difference. in what gets built. So you heard about Renaissance homes. I mean, Renaissance homes, instead of building 2,700 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath homes that work for a small market segment, if they, on the same 3 lots, could build 5 homes that collectively have less square footage than the homes they would have built, but build more of them, and that turned out to make them as much or more money, they would do it in a snap. And frankly, most of the homes are going to be built by the Renaissance homes rather than us. So I think that changing the rules to system development charges, I think I heard from a few people, they almost never scale with house size. You pay the same SDCs for 1,000 square foot house or 5,000 square foot house. That's kind of absurd. Scaling those based on house size would make a big difference in economics. There's a whole list of things, a lot of good low-hanging fruit out there, and that's what people working on the summit are interested in working on. So I think the answer is yes, a few small tweaks of the right rules, financing ADUs is another one of those tweaks, and you could see a lot more activity than you've seen so far in smaller homes. And I should say, after World War II in Portland, they made it much easier to divide a single-family house into a duplex, right? I mean, that's responding to the housing type and the population type. People come back from wars, you know, and you can do that again. I mean, there's a lot of most of the conversations have been around people buying homes, and as we know, most people, that excludes a large group of folks out there who are just not in the position to purchase. If you look at the demographics for Portland, I was kind of expecting the boomer bulge. You've all heard probably in population diagrams. That's where all people are. Look at the city of Portland, the biggest demographic is 25 to 39-year-olds. Mostly 25 to 30-year-old women, that's the biggest group. And you're seeing some of them purchasing homes. For that population mix, they're needing houses that are a lot less expensive than what's out there. And since they're not finding it, they're living in group housing situations. There's, they're renting accessory dwellings. They're trying to do something, and they're kind of shut out. So I think ways to respond to that need. That's what we're here to work on.
Not only are they trying, they are actually doing it. And I think we've got multiple different adults sharing the same house. We've got things that if we looked at the reality of the need, looked at the reality of the population, I think that we can begin to think through the alternatives, make affordable housing with the stock that we have. And I think as designers, we can begin to rethink how larger houses are worked. But to try to do it in above board ways that we don't have to stigmatize, say, multiple families or multiple unrelated adults living in the same house. I think we can just open up our definitions and get beyond ASEAN area, just moving along.
I have 2 questions. First one's very easy, or short. Liability of common buildings and common areas, how's that dealt with? And the second question is, with the change in the real estate appraisals in the last couple of years, how do you, whether appraisers are coming in and comparing square footages for square footages, not quantity or quality, how do you sell people and get financing for smaller homes that, in the long run, when you have infrastructure for common areas, gardens and built-ins and different detail, how do you get appraisers to appraise that out so it gets financing?
I've always been worried about the answer to that question, and I haven't been stung by it yet. Appraisers, when they look at a project with common area, 8 years ago, I've heard of appraisers assigning, say you have a 800 square foot common space divided by 8 homes share it, they've actually assigned sort of an extra 100 foot to each house in the square foot valuation. I've never had an appraiser do that for me. Maybe that's the old days of crazy appraising. But appraisers just look at it as a condominium project with shared common space as an amenity. And although I've had some challenges with the construction appraisal to get the original financing to build the project and had to put in a little more equity than I hoped, when it comes to buyers purchasing the homes, I wonder, I'd be curious what your experiences are. I haven't had a deal fall through because of the appraisal coming in well.
It takes a lot of work from everyone in the team, whether it's your realtor and the lender and the buyer, but generally we can identify a property before we get to appraisal that's going to need a lot of research and some comps, and we do our best to present a case in there's some demonizing of the appraiser out there. I'm glad I don't have their job, but they're really open to when we give them information, and sometimes there's a lack of information, but there is still enough open lines of communication with appraisers that if you can get them some research, get them some other numbers, get them some comparable properties, that they will take that into account. And we definitely have nightmare stories I could tell you about appraisals, but not as many as you would think. And we really don't have as many problems as I would have thought we would have had over these last 3 years about getting properties appraised. It's always the ones that you think are going to be the no problems that we have the problems with, and these difficult ones everyone kind of knows going in, and they prep each other to make it happen.
There was a terrific workshop this morning on financing. And who are the leaders? Any leaders here from that? Can you raise your hand, speak out, and then go in the back? Yeah, great. Absolutely excellent. I mean, there's such a good conversation. I learned so much. I could spend an entire day sort of listening, because I think there's, and I'm so glad that the people on the financing side of these, of this world are here and adding to the conversation. A lot of the conferences, you'll get the builders, or you'll get the planners, or you'll get the architects. But you also have the financing side, because they're a key part of the picture. And I think it's something that, from what I gathered from this morning, it's workable, but it's taking a lot of work. And the more that it happens, the easier it'll be. Is the more comps, the more information, the more things that are passed and forth, back and forth. And I think that the information that comes from the realtor, from the builder, from the architect, to try to show, do the homework, to show the value and present it to the appraiser. They've got to then present it to the bank, but they'll at least have some other things. It's a lot more work for them to do something that's unusual, and yet the fees are going to be probably the same, and so they have to work more for less.
One trick that I've worked with several communities do, if you have more than 6 units in a development, you can make schedule the first sale to be someone who's got relatively high equity, so it doesn't matter how the appraisal comes in. And then that becomes the comp for future sales in the same development. There's a group in Corvallis, 32 units. The first couple sales, they just picked people who didn't need much bank loans. And then from then on, the appraisal just went like a snap. And that's happened in 3 or 4 other developments that I've worked on. So that's one thing. If you have a cluster of homes, you can just do that.
Any questions out in the crowd? Let's come up here.
Hi. I'm a student at UW-Bothell, and I'm looking at housing policy issues. I'm mainly concerned with disabled, accessible housing, and what I'm seeing happening is all, especially over the last decade or more. Houses being built by builders and developments, they're all 2-3-story homes. Everyone wants to go vertical. So people are being excluded from these communities. Say it's a veteran who's been waiting 3 years to get a home because there just aren't any. So as far as finding a home that's already built, that meets the needs with a rolling shower and things like that, is there a way you can address that with the cottage community?
Well, absolutely. And I think that as the bulging boomers, the boomer bulge comes in, and the needs for universally accessible housing are going to come in like a steamroller, it's going to wake up the society to the fact that there are many people of all ages that need accessibility. And right now it's a few people here and there, and their numbers perhaps are not large enough. And I think that as this comes in, we're going to architects, designers, builders, developers are going to acknowledge that this is going to be a market, and it's going to be dealt with. To renovate existing houses for accessibility can be a challenge sometimes. It requires major changes of plumbing and electrical and surfaces, and that can push up the price of a renovation quite high. So, unfortunately, sometimes it's even cheaper to build new than to renovate something old. So it's an important need that's going to come on in the coming years soon.
You've seen a lot of images of converted garages. Those make really easy conversions to accessible spaces. We did that one project. And with the 3-story Woolsey Corner affordable project, all the ground level units there are accessible with townhouse units on top. So that's a higher density model they can achieve. Some really nice 1-level units and have 2-story units mixed into.
It's a really common conversation that our clients have with us actually is age in place. I'm always surprised at the long-term thinking that our clients bring to their purchase. And I've seen a lot of builders respond to that. A lot of masters on the main, double suites, one downstairs, one upstairs. But it's something that I think more and more buyers are thinking about. And what we have found, the houses that adapt really well, I was talking about the split levels don't do so well with the daylight ranches. That was another thing that really got brought up into the conversation is people are like, wow, it's one level, we can age in place here. And it's something, it's a phrase that more and more people are using and you realize how important it is and what it means.
I actually have a question about smaller homes. When people come to you looking for smaller homes, how many people use that as an opportunity to improve performance as well? If they think they're scaling back on square footage, take that opportunity to improve the overall performance of the envelope.
We've found that a lot. I think that people are, they come to us looking for something that is smaller, well-designed, but they're coming with a lot of things that are around the energy envelope and materials and quality that is lower maintenance and more durable. And I think those two are fitting together. So they're not just coming, oh, I want small, I'd like it to be just boxy and simple and basic and cheap. That's there, and that's fine. We can work with that. But there's a lot of people who could choose to buy much more square footage, but they don't want it. Small doesn't have the same stigma that it had 10 years ago. In part thanks to people like Sarah Sasenko, to show that there are good possibilities. In a lot of the books that Taunton Press has put out. What I'd like to do now is to take a look at, okay, how do we have this larger, they get to be quite expensive. I'd like to show less expensive but still well done houses. How do we really maximize value in the details that we build? So it's a challenge. I think as other designers and architects out there, we're gonna step up to it.
Yeah, our clients really are totally redefining what luxury means or what quality means. It's smaller. They want the high-end finishes. They want details. They want design. They're willing to pay more for those things, but they don't want something bigger. And so they just, like gadgets are really fun. People that can show their friends, like, oh, look at my utility spinning backwards, or the solar panels. They're having a lot more fun with those things and living in smaller spaces.
All right. Are there any other questions in the audience? Anyone I'm not seeing? All right, let's take this opportunity to thank our panelists.
Just also one last thing, if you do want CEUs for this continuing ed, David's got the sheet over there. And this is just an opportunity to stretch your legs for about 15 minutes, and we'll be right back in this room for the closing slam. Don't